very, very optimistic. Some people think that advocating limited government is like making children eat broccoli, which, as you know, in the Bush family is something we're not big fans of. And sorry for all the broccoli growers out there. In fact, you know, the last time Bush mentioned broccoli and how much they despised it was my dad. Unfortunately, he was president of the United States. And about 3 days later, the California Broccoli Growers Association unloaded about 6 truckloads in front of the White House as a present for my dad's dislike of broccoli. My mom, of course, again being the leader of our family, figured out the best thing to do was to deliver all of that broccoli to the homeless shelters in Washington to create a win out of a very embarrassing situation. But limited government is not telling people to do what they don't want to do. Limited government allows us to unleash the creativity of individual initiative. Conservatives need to remind ourselves that what we believe in is having 1,000 people, 1,000,000 people interacting with one another, and in that interaction, the innovation and productivity that comes exceeds any government command and control program that ever exists. We should have confidence that that works. It's worked since the beginning of time. And so when your governor advocates cutting taxes and limiting government, it shouldn't be a surprise that Indiana has seen tremendous growth in economic development activity. It wasn't a surprise in Florida when we cut taxes every year to the tune of a cumulative amount of $20 billion, that we led the nation during those 8 years in job growth. It shouldn't be a surprise when you curb government spending, people begin to have confidence that their own ability to spend for their own needs becomes first and foremost. Cutting property taxes, cutting the number of government employees, reforming the system, limiting government is a pretty cool thing. And we should be not ashamed about it, but we should advance it. I see there are a lot of members of the Indiana legislature here, including the president of the Indiana Senate, and we've had a lively discussion about the natural friction the founders created in our constitutions between the executive and the legislature. It brings back fond memories of my time as governor. In fact, one of the things that gave me the greatest joy, Mr. President, was using the line item veto, believe it or not, as governor. In fact, in Florida, we didn't call this pork out of respect for all of the pork farmers in Indiana. We called it the other white meat. There you go. All 6 of them in the back. We called them turkeys. And so I had the opportunity during my 8 years to line item out of our budget 2,558 line items totaling $2.4 billion, earning me the nickname that I most enjoyed. I had some others I can't repeat right now, but the one I most enjoyed was Vito Corleone. Can I tell you how it warmed my heart? I vetoed a line item in the budget of the Department of Juvenile Justice called Where You At? And it was vetoed, and I announced that I vetoed it because of bad grammar. I vetoed 4 years in a row the alligator marketing budget of $150,000. My thought was, we have enough alligators in Florida. They eat little poodles in our lakes. They create havoc. We should probably have open hunting season to thin out the population rather than market them. In any case, the point was that this was a popular thing. A conservative governor acting on his belief, limiting the size and scope of government was a pretty cool thing, and people seem to like it. I hope and pray that the next President of the United States regains the power of the line item veto. I think it would make a tremendous amount of difference in Washington, D.C. Imagine what it would be like if you believe in limited government with a President Obama, a Speaker Pelosi, and a President of the Senate, a Majority Leader Reid. I don't want to think about it too much, and I don't want your imagination to run wild because with our work, this won't happen. But it is a pretty scary thought, and we're not even near Halloween. If you think about this, the size and scope of government will definitely grow. The ability to use the power of government to advance special interest causes will definitely become the norm. The ability for people to be able to make ends meet will be diminished. It is important for us to not only have limited government in places like Indiana and Florida, but it is really important where we don't have much fiscal discipline to impose it on Washington, D.C. And John McCain is the only candidate for president that truly believes that, and he is deserving of your support. We live in a world where our government, by and large, is operating in many ways as though similar to how it was operating in the 1950s or 1960s, and yet we're living in 2008. The world has radically changed, not just in the last 25 years, but almost in the last 5 years. The advancement and the changes and the disruptive nature of life is dramatic. It's amazing what is going on, and yet our government still operates more or less in this industrial model that is not as effective as it needs to be. So not only do conservatives need to advocate limited government, but we need to have a zeal for reform. We need to be the philosophy and the party that advocates the changes that make government work better. And there are two places where that is desperately needed right now in our country. One is education, where there is a direct link between people's aspiration for themselves and their families in terms of their ability to grow income for themselves and their education outcomes. Today in America, if you do not have a high school degree, the chances of you gaining a wage, a job that will allow you to live an independent life is next to nil. You will be subsidized by your neighbors and by government. If you have a high school degree, the chances of being successful are slightly greater, but still the chances of being successful 10 years from now and 20 years from now, only with a high school degree, will limit the horizons of that person. If you have a college degree, based on the data that exists, the chances are that you will have 30 to 40% higher wages in real terms than those with a high school degree. And a postgraduate degree, those numbers grow even more. And that gap will grow and grow and grow with each passing year. Yet we operate our education system as though we are living in the agricultural era rather than in the post-industrial era. In Florida in 1999, we started grading schools based on student achievement. Sounds like a radical idea. In fact, we did something really radical. We graded schools A, B, C, D, and F. And if a school was graded F, children in those failing schools could go to another school, a public school, or a private school. And guess what happened? The very fact that there was a choice empowered people that were never empowered before, and the schools that were not performing began to see the greatest gains. Florida is one of 3 states in the country in the last 7 years that has closed the achievement gap based on race and ethnicity. Florida has gone from the back of the pack to above the national average. In fact, low-income Hispanics, based on the NAEP test, which is the only national test that exists, low-income Hispanics in the state of Florida do better than average California, than the average of the entire state of California. We're ahead of 15 states in terms of African American and Hispanic student achievement, because that achievement gap has closed because we have high expectations for everybody, we have accountability, and there's a consequence between improvement and mediocrity. We've applied the basic principles that work in everyday life, applied them to our education system, and guess what? More kids, thousands, hundreds of thousands of kids are gaining the ability to read at grade level, calculate math at grade level, and the next great crisis in education in Florida is going to be an avalanche of qualified high school graduates going to the community college and university system, which is exactly the kind of crisis that we should have.